Hey there, my fellow author. I'm Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, an old soul kind of writer living my dream as a full-time author and authorpreneur. But I didn't start out living a confident, creative lifestyle. I struggled with the fears and the mental and emotional barriers that so often plague writers at all stages of their author career. But the truth is that with the right knowledge, tools, and training, you can overcome those barriers. I'm here to teach you how I've developed a lifestyle that's allowed me to publish 19 books and counting. Each week, as you tune into the Confident Fiction Author podcast, you'll get clarity on the steps you need to take to advance your writing career. Whether it's developing your ideal writing routine, tackling new skills like dictating your fiction, or overcoming the obstacles life throws your way, this podcast will help you live a more confident, creative lifestyle. Let's get started. Hey there, my friend, and welcome to this week's episode of the Confident Fiction Author podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Elizabeth Sawyer, and I have a question for you. Have you ever heard the saying, "Mama didn't raise no quitter"? If you didn't, I think we all grow up with hearing some form of "don't be a quitter, don't quit." And by and large, I agree with that. But let me ask you, what if there were times and circumstances when being a quitter as an author was a good thing? The reality is you probably have too much on your plate. Maybe you even came to that realization just after listening to my episode on decluttering your author life. That was episode 15 if you want to go back and listen to that. But I will say that saying no to things takes a lot of courage. So in this episode, I want to give you some of my tools and techniques you can use to exercise your no muscle and keep it in shape. Because I believe that living our most confident writing lives means knowing when to quit and how to quit. In this episode, we will learn how to become a confident quitter and how to do it while still honoring others. Let's get into it. Let's break apart the question, can quitting actually be a good thing? For those of you who are still skeptical, you hear that voice in your head, don't be a quitter. Let me ask, don't we celebrate when someone quits a bad habit like smoking or another addiction that is harmful to themselves and those around them? So in things like that, quitting is a victory. But when it comes to reducing commitments as authors, we are conditioned to feel guilty for quitting things that aren't working, even when the commitment is becoming actively detrimental to our time, our resources, and our health. So part of having healthy boundaries is saying no to opportunities that may seem good, but that don't fit into our immediate priorities. Maybe a friend asks you to join a multi-author anthology, which seems great on the surface, but taking on that commitment would strain your time and your energy. And so with having those healthy boundaries means also periodically reevaluating commitments that were positive but have since shifted. Because we all have seasons. We all have seasons of our lives when we commit to things that is great for that season and had a really positive impact, but things have changed. You have moved to a different season of your life and your author career. Again, I talked about that in Decluttering Your Author Life, where I was a part of a critique group for a few years, and it was wonderful for that season, but ultimately I quit that group because it was time for me to move into a new season of my author career. So it's really important to reevaluate your commitments and what it is that you have on your plate during this season of your author career. And so I want to encourage you to think about changing your mindset on quitting. I want you to acknowledge that life is seasonal. And seasons coming to an end is a part of life. It's a part of the cycle of life, and it's not inherently a failure. I think sometimes when we have to quit something, walk away from something, or say no, that it's a reflection on who we are as a person or on our author career, and that we've had this failure now, and we mark it as a failure rather than just something we needed to quit. Because the fact is, sometimes we may be trying to make something last longer, that the very act of doing that becomes a failure itself. And so by trying to prolong something beyond its season in your life can be bad for you and for those around you. And that leads us to self-awareness. Why are you carrying so much guilt about readjusting your priorities? I think there are typically two reasons why we might hesitate to quit something, even if we know it's time to step back. That season has ended and we need to reevaluate and just quit that particular commitment. And so this guilt that we have often stems from how we view ourselves. A part of that self-awareness is asking yourself, is it possible that you have put all of your identity into this one task? Does participating in this group or that activity or that anthology or that group blog, is that defining who I am as an author? Should it define me as an author? The other part of our guilt stems from letting others down. And boy, that's a big one. So let's break it down here just a bit. A big part of that is people pleasing. I know most of us are guilty of that. We want to make everyone happy. We want to ride in and save the day and make sure everyone is happy and taken care of. And that can be a good thing. There's nothing wrong with having a caring spirit and wanting to take care of others. But a part of that self-awareness is you need to take an honest assessment. Are you really the superhero of everyone's lives? Is that your role in life? Are you supposed to ride in to the rescue every time you hear of a problem in someone's life or in their author career and you want to fix it for them? Or they ask you to fix it. And I remember seeing this coffee mug that said, "Let me drop everything I'm doing to fix your problems." And so it may be that people are making you feel guilty, that you've let them down, even if it's something you didn't commit to do or that was your responsibility to fix or do. Maybe they invited you into an anthology and you graciously had to say no, and they come back with their disappointment and that makes you feel guilty, and you carry that into your future decisions when someone else asks you to participate in something that you know you really don't have time for. And then sometimes quitting is letting other people down. You committed to something and they expected you to do it, and now you're coming to them and telling them that that you have taken this assessment of your life and you really need to quit this particular activity that you were a part of. So in a minute, I'm going to cover how you can do that in a way that you aren't letting people down, and therefore you avoid that guilt entirely. So, can you quit while still honoring others? That's the big question. We genuinely don't want to let people down, and we shouldn't let them down, especially if it's something that you have committed to and they're really counting on you. You gave them your word and you're not a quitter. You have that reputation and that trust. So, what do you do in circumstances like that? Can you quit while still not letting people down and in some way honoring the commitment that you made to them? First, I want you to remember that you do your collaborators a favor by being honest about your limitations rather than trying to do more than you're capable of. So if you're in a commitment and you're telling yourself this story that you are going to be able to do it all when you know there is physically and time and energy wise, it is absolutely impossible for you to do that. That is just causing stress, delay, and even compromising the quality of your group effort. So by you trying to muscle through and get this done by brute force and strength of will, you may actually be making things more miserable and difficult for everyone else, and may even contribute to making the project fail or compromising that quality, or it just not being everything that it could be. This was something that I had recently. It was a hard decision to make. I had to have 2 hard conversations, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I was committed to writing a screenplay for a dear sweet friend of mine, and I absolutely loved the book that she wrote. and she had a producer interested in doing the project. So they contacted me about doing the screenplay, and I absolutely wanted to do it. I looked at my schedule, I looked at my commitments, and I was like, this will be tough, but if I block out these types of hours and work on it in this way over this time period, I could get it done. I could get this feature-length screenplay written. So there was a whole series of events that I won't go into, but basically it really stretched the timeline out to where the expectation of getting the screenplay written landed in a very busy season for me. It landed among a bunch of other commitments that I had that were already maxing me out. And as I looked ahead to the next several months, I knew I simply would not be able to get this project done because of how the timeline and other circumstances had shifted. The project essentially changed from what I had originally committed to. And I knew that by trying to maintain my original commitment and keep my word about doing this project, that it would ultimately cause more delays and overall problems to the project. So I had to quit that commitment. And I'm going to share how I did it here in just a minute. It's something else I want you to think about when you are looking at quitting, stepping out of a role or position that you were in, is sometimes stepping back allows others to step up and shine. It goes back to that, we want to ride in and save the day, and we think we're the only ones who can fulfill this project and do this role well. But what we often find is when we step back and we trust others to take on that role, to take on that blog post on the author blog that you were a part of, or get their story into the anthology, you're really giving other people that opportunity to shine in ways that they never were before. And so in a sense, that's honoring others. So that's another example of quitting being a good thing. You're allowing for others to really shine in their gifts and their talents. All right, let's get into the big question, which I know was on my mind, and especially when I have committed to something that I really shouldn't have committed to, or my seasons of life have changed, or other circumstances come up, and now I have the difficult task of quitting those commitments. Let me give you 4 tips on how to eliminate existing commitments. So tip number 1 is ask yourself if you can reduce the commitment and pivot to a different commitment rather than dropping out. So for example, if you are on a group author blog or a podcast and you discover that you've just really overcommitted by taking that on, and it may be that your obligation is to write a weekly blog post to contribute, and that's just too much. But maybe you feel comfortable with contributing bi-weekly or monthly. And so that's the first thing you can do when you're assessing a commitment is, can you just do less and still be a part of it? That's really the first thing you can do with assessing a commitment is, can you reduce your commitment rather than quitting it entirely? After that assessment, you may decide that, nope, I can't even do once a month. I couldn't even do a yearly blog post. I need to just let this go entirely because it's not just the time investment, it's the energy investment. It's always on my mind. It's always stressing me because I know I need to get it done, and I'm just not anywhere near in the position to fulfill this commitment on a regular basis, and I need to just quit it entirely. And so that leads us to tip number 2, and that is to value honesty in your collaborative relationships. Fairly communicating limitations honors the relationship and builds trust. So you want to be honest with your collaborators or with the person that you committed to do a certain thing with. And rather than trying to say all the right things when you're having conversations with them and keep it on the surface like you're doing the commitment and like you're going to continue going forward with it, when all the time in the back of your mind you're trying to think of how to get out of it or how to reduce it, just have honesty in those relationships. I remember back whenever I was co-writing with a friend of mine, and we were just co-writing for fun. It wasn't to publish. We never published those books, but it was a lot of fun. And we actually co-wrote 4 books together. So it was a long commitment. And there were seasons that I had to tell my friend, I can't do this right now. I have all of these other things going on. And as much as I hate to, I've got to put this off for a time. And, or maybe it was just that week and I would have to communicate, I just have a lot going on and I'm not going to be able to co-write this week. And so it is important that you are communicating what your limitations are with that person, and that can build trust. They trust that you are going to be honest with them and that you're not going to commit to something and they're sitting around that week toe tapping, waiting for you to send them their co-written pages, and you haven't even given it a thought other than it's stressing you because you can't get to it. Let's tackle tips 3 and 4. They go together in the sense that if you need to completely step back from a prior commitment, you need to totally quit this project. Here's a couple of things you can do. 1, you can offer other solutions. I think this is really, really important especially if it's not per se an emergency. Like when my dad passed away and I quit a lot of my commitments, including my writing critique group and Toastmasters, it was completely understandable. Nothing was expected of me to offer any kinds of solutions or anything like that. That was the situation that I was in, and everyone was extremely understanding. There was absolutely no guilt. In fact, there was just tons of prayers and encouragement from those people that I had spent so much time with the previous 3 years. And so if you're in a situation like that and you need to just quit a lot of commitments, people will understand and you don't need to offer anything else. But if you're in a season of overwhelm and you realize you are not going to be able to fulfill your commitment, you have said yes to too many things and you're realizing that now as you're trying to fulfill all the commitments and you have to quit on your commitment, that's when it gets really hard because of going back to that saying, Mama didn't raise no quitter. And we think about the guilt and we think about letting people down. And honestly, breaking trust. They trusted you to fulfill that commitment. So one of the biggest things that you can do is offer a solution. So if you are quitting that group author blog, have another author that you recommend to take your place who can contribute fantastic value to the blog and you feel like they would be willing to do it and it would be a great opportunity for them. And that's where stepping back can allow others to shine and you are recommending them to that place that they wouldn't have had otherwise. It can also be nominating a replacement co-leader for your book club before you step down, or maybe you're going to come back to it later. So if you are quitting something like that, it's something that you're leading, consider bringing someone on board that you can train to replace you before you actually leave. So if you've got a 3-month window for your book club, maybe it's not super urgent that you quit this book club, but you do have a change of season coming up in your life. Maybe you're having a baby or you're getting married or you're going back to school. And you need to start quitting some of your current commitments, but you have some time. You have 3 months or 6 months to get yourself in the right position. So bring someone else on that can take over that role of leading the book club that you started. That way, all of the members get to know them. The new leader gets to know your process and the feel and atmosphere that you go for with the book club and some of the technical details, and start turning over the Telegram group or whatever Facebook group that you're using for the book club before you take your grand bow out and fully quit that commitment. And then tip number 4, which goes along with if you're needing to just completely quit a project, is you are going to have the hard conversation. So whenever I quit the screenplay commitment, whenever I had to completely walk away from that, I had to make 2 phone calls. I had to make one to the producer and the other one to my dear friend, which I knew it would be difficult, and she was disappointed, and she was also very sweet about it. She understands that I have a lot of a lot of responsibilities and things going on with my author career. And because I did it in love and with grace, she was very receptive about it. And I also gave her some encouragement about the project and that I would continue to be supportive of the endeavor and just acknowledging her part in it, her perspective of it, how much this means to her. But what I want, because I feel like you can do those things and that you're prepared to do those things when you have to quit something. The really hard part, and what I want to challenge you with when you have these types of conversations, and it is a hard quit, it's a complete quit, is don't leave the door open if you truly want it closed. And that's what's so hard about these hard conversations is as we start hearing the disappointment come from the other person, or maybe they're asking us or begging us to still be a part of the project. And we are so tempted to go, yeah, I'm just really busy right now. I have this, and this, but maybe once I get these things taken care of, I can come back to this. And that's what I want you to guard against. When you're having the conversation, you've already made the decision that you are closing this door and you are done with that project. You need to honor that, because by trying to let the guilt take over and the people pleasing and wanting to hem-haw around of, well, maybe I can come back into it, or they're asking you, well, could you do this on the weekends? Or they're really trying to find ways to keep you in the project, but you've made that decision. You are closing that door. You have to stick with that and know that no is a complete sentence. You have made your decision and it's time to close that chapter of your life. Now, if they genuinely do have a solution for you, you can consider it, but don't commit to it right then. Say, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. And then go back to your honest assessment, your honest evaluation, be honest with yourself above all, and ask if recommitting to this at a lesser level is something you are willing to do and should do. And if it's not, you send them that email, text message, phone call, and say, no, I do have to quit this entirely, and I do hope the best for you and for the project. I just can't be a part of it. And I know that's hard. That's why I called this tip, having the hard conversation, but it's just so important. If you leave that door cracked, it will only lead to more stress and angst and potentially doing damage that just can't be undone in that relationship and even to your reputation. So if it's time to truly quit something, explain it with grace, acknowledge their perspective, and close the door. All right, my friend, in wrapping this up, I just want you to ask yourself, am I really worried about the other person and what I committed to, or am I really concerned about how I will look? So aligning our intentions with truly honoring the other person versus just honoring our appearances or wanting to look like we have it all together and feeding our ego. We want that foundation of it to be about good decision making and not our ego. Now, let me end this episode with a question you may be asking yourself, and it's the big, ugly, scary question that many authors are afraid to ask of themselves, much less ask it out loud, and that is, what if I'm thinking about quitting writing entirely? Like quitting writing itself. So that's what we're tackling in next week's episode of The Confident Fiction Author. I will see you there. Meanwhile, I want to ask that if you've been enjoying the Confident Fiction Author podcast and you've gotten value from it, would you just take 1 to 2 minutes and leave me a review either on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube, wherever it is that you're listening to this episode? I would really appreciate if you would give it a 5-star rating and review if you feel it deserves it. It just really helps with getting the word out about this new podcast and helping your fellow writers discover it so that they too can learn how to live their best creative lifestyle. That's all for this week, my friend. I will see you in next week's episode. Take care.